um, which is, just a really, really challenging time for everybody. So all that you do to support the families, the children, the community at large, it's such valuable work, especially with everything we're confronting. And to everyone who's out there today, thank you for joining us today, mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, aunts, uncles, grandma, grandpa, abuela, abuelita, everyone who's out there, thank you so much. We hope we're in a position to provide you with some information. I suspect that there may be a few people out there who have submitted Ames program applications or have some questions. So you may have heard from me or Miss Mays. If not, don't worry. If you've submitted an application, that's something we'll absolutely cover today. And we'll be happy to answer any and all questions. We can stay on as long as you need to make sure we respond to any questions that you have. But these are really unprecedented times. It's extraordinarily challenging for students and families. And so it's really an honor to be here to be able to provide you with information and hopefully some type of meaningful guidance moving forward in support of you and your children. Okay. And so, by the way, I'm Dr. Borg. I'm the psychologist.
And I'm Julie Mays, the clinical social worker for the Ames program.
Okay. So we have a PowerPoint available, and I guess we can just jump right into that. Let me just share my screen, and the PowerPoint is a summary of the work we do in the Ames program. And it also, we can kind of expand a little bit beyond just Ames. We can talk about children who are identified with autism in general, and we can devote a little bit of time to what families may be looking at and other considerations. But Ms. Mays and we are the clinical team for the Ames program. So a significant percentage of what we'll be talking about today will be specific to the Ames program. So as you can see, I'm the psychologist, Ms. Mays is the social worker. A quick oversight on our end. I don't know if we included our emails in this PowerPoint, but don't worry, I will enter that into the chat. And for anyone who's already applied to the program, the Ames program at schools.nyc.gov, if you send emails there, if you've had contact, those emails get forwarded to Ms. Mays and myself anyway. So we would have contact with you through there. Okay. All right. So we'll give, this is just the general overview of today, the history of Ames, current information about the program, the application process, the assessment and eligibility review process, and how placement works. Okay. The individuals that are kind of directly involved with the Ames program out of the District 75, what we call the district office, like I said, Ms. Mays and myself, we're the clinical team, but there are some very important individuals who we rely on and guide us and really lead us in many ways. So Mark Corallo is actually the director of the Office of Autism. Mark had intended on participating today. Unfortunately, Mark had a medical issue that he had to have addressed this week. He may actually be listening in right now. So if so, hi, Mark, hope you're feeling better. But he's our fearless leader. He's the head of the director of the Office of Autism, which is a specific department within the broader work of the District 75. And so he's very hands-on, very knowledgeable. He has a background in speech and language therapy, but a tremendous wealth of information in working with children who have been identified as being on the spectrum, and he administrates and supervises, oversees the Ames program. We have three absolutely, and I hope this doesn't sound like hyperbole, but just absolutely amazing, incredibly professional, well-informed expertise coaches, Nicole Barnett, Debbie Goldman, Nisha Murray. It's really a shame they couldn't be here today, but given the state of the world and the affairs that we're in, they are hands-on supporting children directly one-on-one right now in various settings throughout the schools. So it's a shame they couldn't be here, but they often provide direct support to children, families, maintain the fidelity of the program by supporting staff, classroom teachers, speech and language therapists, OTs, everyone else. So they do a wonderful job. They're all BCBAs, which is one of the hallmark features of Ames. And it's an absolute pleasure and an honor being able to work with folks who not only have devoted their lives towards supporting children who've been identified with autism, but do so in an incredibly professional and just incredibly competent way. It's really just an honor to watch them work. So that's our team. The AIMS program, as many of you may know, and you may not, it's a relatively new program. So the New York City Department of Education has there is a continuum of services available to families who have children who have been identified with autism, and various educational opportunities and IEP programs and supports. Probably the most well known, excuse me, and the programs that have the longest history and the biggest footprint would be what are called ASD specialized programs. Those are programs like ASD Nest, ASD Horizon, which have been around for, and Nest has been around, I used to work with them, I think over 20 years now. Horizon, probably close to 15 years, maybe a little more. Those are community school programs. We'll talk about that a little bit later. AIMS is a relatively new program. Our first cohort of students began in the AIMS program officially in September of 2019, so last year. And as you can imagine, last year was quite a year to start a new program. We had an initial rollout, kind of a pilot phase rollout, where we had one District 75 organization in each borough housed our program. And so on the screen are the sites that we are currently located in. So for September of 2020, this current academic year, 2020/2021, we've retained those sites. The AIMS program continues to be up and running and functioning. And I may be biased, but I think doing wonderful work given the challenges that everyone is facing. But we didn't expand. We didn't contract either, which is a really good thing. So these are our locations. In Brooklyn, we're in Bay Ridge. In the Bronx, we're over in Throgs Neck, all the way between the Whitestone and Throgs Neck bridges. In Manhattan, we're located in our Harlem location by Lexington and 128. In Queens, we're in Corona, right off of Junction Boulevard, I believe it is. And in Staten Island, we're in Annandale, which is kind of sort of the middle, slightly southern part of Staten Island. Okay, so these are our locations right now, and each of these sites houses an AIMS program, which has 3 classrooms. So there's a total of 15 classrooms in total in the city, 6 students in each class. We'll talk more about that as this presentation goes along, for a total of 90 seats. Okay. So and here, this is a little redundant, basically what I had just reviewed. The AIMS program is a program that there's kind of a long backstory on it. I don't want to really waste too much time on that, but there's ABA, and the specific version of ABA that we employ, which is called verbal behavior. There's an increasing recognition and an understanding that students identified with autism, particularly students who are identified with more severe manifestations of autism, really benefit from this very data-driven, empirically supported approach. And so the DOE wanted to be sensitive and responsive to that, so they developed this program, and it was in the works for a while. It all came together very quickly in the early part of 2019, and then it was rolled out. So as you see, we use an ABA-VB approach. ABA for applied behavior analysis, and VB is what we call verbal behavior. It's a specific type and approach within the broader context of ABA. So we're a 6-to-1-to-1 program, which is a standard program recommendation in District 75, a class of 6 students, 1 New York State certified special education teacher, along with a paraprofessional. But there's a number of things that make AIMS unique. One of the things, and you'll see kind of the first point, I'll try to circle my mouse around it, is that the speech and language services that a student who is admitted into AIMS receives, the speech provider is embedded in the classroom. So we work on what's verbal behavior, which is teaching functional communication. This is really the core component of the AIMS program, what we're trying to do with our children who come in with severe and pervasive delays in language and communication in general. Most, if not all, of our students might be considered nonverbal, where there are verbal skills, and we'll talk about that. There are significant delays in those areas. The AIMS program is a K-2 program. So it's intended for early learners. So we provide supports for those students who are in kindergarten, first or second grade. We only take applications during the turning 5 process, which for parents out there, I suspect there's many of you whose children are going through that, who will be transitioning into kindergarten in September 2021, and for students in kindergarten and first grade. While we do have second grade students in our program, we don't take applications for current second graders. Okay, and like I had mentioned, the program began last year. So we're in our second year. We're very proud of the work we're doing. We're thrilled with the involvement of the families and everyone supporting the families. We feel like there's some tremendous progress and valuable work being done, even in the face of overwhelming circumstances and once in a century social circumstances that have really impeded on all of us. The AIMS application process is fairly straightforward. And if anyone has any questions about this, again, we'll put our emails in afterwards. We'll be happy to answer any question. Applications are submitted to the AIMS program inbox, which is right here, the email address, aimsprogram@schools.nyc.gov. There's an application on the DOE website. We have applications in multiple languages, in most, if not all, of the languages that families require in New York City. So if you go on to the DOE website and you have trouble either accessing the application or you don't see an application in the language that you need, let us know and we will get that to you immediately. Okay, you submit the application, and then once you submit the application, usually within a period of 2 or 3 days, you'll receive a confirmation email. And attached to that email will be what's called the Family Resource Guide, which is a more detailed document that describes what we're going to talk about here today in general, but we'll be happy to go into as much detail as you need. Okay. After the application is submitted, the AIMS clinical team, myself, Ms. Mays, Mr. Corallo, the coaches where needed, we then conduct a very thorough and comprehensive review of all available materials. And this is where sometimes we ask parents for a little bit of patience, especially during the turning 5 process. We want to give every child a full and fair, as rich and comprehensive a review of their application as they're entitled to. And there is a fairly high demand for the program, so we do receive a lot of applications, but we want to make sure that that every child is given the opportunity of having all of their materials reviewed. So CSE documents, CPSE, in other words, school age documents, IEPs, teacher reports, provider updates, any testing that may have been done as part of either the CPSE process during preschool, during the turning 5 process, psychoeducational assessments, outside information. Some families have children assessed by outside providers. Absolutely fine. We are open to any type of information that families wanted to forward to us that they think would be helpful and meaningful as part of the application review process, so we have as full and rich an understanding of their child. Okay, when we look at eligibility, the eligibility, it kind of dovetails with the basic structure, function, and purpose of the program. And as I had mentioned before, what we do in AIMS, the primary kind of focus, the primary directive, kind of my Star Trek background coming in, would be we work with children to support them in the area of functional communication skills. So language and communication, children who are being considered for the AIMS program, or people who are families or advocates or outside professionals affiliated with families who are interested in the AIMS program, this is a program that is intended to support children with significant delays in language and communication, right? Children who some people might refer to as nonverbal or preverbal, or don't have functional language skills. Some children in the AIMS program may have language, they may be able to use words, but not in a functional manner. So they may repeat, they may engage in what's called echolalia, hearing something earlier in the day and then repeating it throughout the day. They may script or scroll, they hear something on TV and they constantly repeat that. So they don't have functional language skills. And that's what we try to teach. And that's really what verbal behavior is as a form of ABA. It's trying to improve functional communication. And when I say communication, I use that in the broadest possible way. In other words, it's not just verbal language in the way I'm talking to you now. It could be, and Ms. Mays is going to elaborate on this later, it could be something like PECS, a picture communication system, where a child develops a voice. It's not a talking voice, it's a picture communication system, but it enhances functional communication. Some of our students incorporate some sign language, they use sign, and our providers work with them on that. Others use communication devices, what's called augmentative communication devices or assistive technology. So whatever the child's preferred means of communication, we identify, we support, and we try to help it enrich and grow so the child has functional, independent communication skills. That's what we're working on. Okay, so clearly, the I suppose it's fair to say that the primary issue we're looking at is children whose autism manifests in a way where one of the core features are severe delays in language and communication. Some of the programs I mentioned earlier, say the ASD Nest and Horizon programs, there are delays in language and communication there, but it's qualitatively different. It's a very different type of um, kind of clinical profile you're looking at. Often the skills are more advanced in certain areas, and there are needs that need to be supported for sure. But our children, there are pervasive and wholesale delays with communication. Other areas where where we find children might need to be supported within the AIMS program, and this isn't exclusive to AIMS. This is what I'm talking about can be thought of more broadly as children who might even be considered, for any District 75 or non-community school placement. So in addition to, deficits with respect to language and communication, adaptive behavior and daily living skills. So adaptive behaviors are those behaviors that let people meet in an age appropriate manner the demands on them for that age, right? So what are the things we expect a kindergarten child to do? To be able to go to school, transition to the building, take their backpack off, cubby, go down, circle time, da da da, right? So adaptive behaviors and daily living skills. Daily living skills are also very, very important, and it's an area we work on. So things like toileting, dressing, transitioning, feeding oneself, those types of daily living skills that are so important to maintaining an appropriate level of functioning in the social environment. Children, especially children who've been identified with a more severe form of autism, these are very common areas that often require clinical support. And when a child has significant deficits with language and communication, as you might imagine, it can impact those other areas, right? So if a child is really struggling with and has significant developmental delays with language and communication, those types of transitions, requesting, needing support, kind of those interactions that help support adaptive behaviors and daily living skills, it's going to be really, really difficult. So you may see impediments in those areas that in part could be due to the language and communication delays. And so we feel like we're really well equipped to deal with those types of issues and needs as well. And finally, as families know and professionals know, children who are identified with autism, we can also see inconsistencies in development with respect to behavior and socialization. A core component of self-regulation, behavior, and socializing with us is the use of language. So as you might imagine, children in the AIMS program whose language is significantly delayed to the point where often they don't have functional communication language, but they really don't coming into the program. Behavior and socialization are areas we often find underdeveloped. So we don't really have broader group-based activities that you may see, say, in a community school-based kindergarten program, because larger group activities are still in most ways kind of beyond the current capacities of children in the AIMS program due to the significant delays in language and communication. So they often receive a lot of one-to-one, one-to-two type work. Some of the ABA methodology uses that one-to-one approach to help skill build and improve functional communication. There could be a host of other types of behaviors and dynamics that we see for children on the autism spectrum, self-stimulatory behaviors, repetitive behaviors, restrictive behaviors, things like that. Because the AIMS program doesn't have one-to-one behavior power professionals, because we have a high ratio and we have the speech provider, we have the paraprofessional, classroom power, we have the teacher, we don't have one-to-one powers for crisis, what are called behavior paraprofessional, used to be referred to as behavior paras. And so we would never exclude a child for any single reason. We look at children in their entirety, but we do. There are some children who may present with deficits in self-regulation that may be where it may pose a significant risk to themselves or others, that requires, you know, a high degree of adult attention. So that's something we'd want to take a look at to make sure that the AIMS program would be able to support those types of behaviors in the classroom. And that's something that we would follow up with the family, with the current providers. It's a standard part of the application review process, but we don't have one-to-one paraprofessionals for self-regulation in the, excuse me, in an AIMS classroom. Okay. Um, so we normally have an assessment protocol that we use. And again, we do so because we want to get as much information about the child as possible, not only to determine eligibility, but also to have a really nice, rich and comprehensive foundation for those children once they do come in, that we can start our program and get, you know, getting to work and building those skills that need to be built. Because of what's going on with COVID right now, some of what I'm about to talk about is going to be modified, because there are health and safety protocols that supersede everything else. Nothing is more important than health and safety. So we're going to adjust our protocols to make sure that children stay safe, families stay safe, the clinicians stay safe. We do request, under non-pandemic circumstances, the following. We would look at an attempt to see intellectual functioning, especially nonverbal. Many of our children in the AIMS program, verbal assessments of verbal components of cognition might be really difficult and not particularly informative because of the lack of language, but other types of other forms of intelligence, nonverbal intelligence, things like that, it might be helpful for us to have a sense of where the child is and how we can harness those skills in support of the program. So we may ask clinicians to administer those. We would certainly ask for some type of autism specific measure. These are measures that any New York City Department of Education school psychologist or social worker, anyone on a school assessment team can administer. The CARS, the GARS, the SRS, there's a whole number of questionnaires and instruments out there that can provide a fairly quick and easy assessment of the degree to which autism is impacting a child's current level of functioning. And then we also, in conjunction with that, we ask for what's called an adaptive behavior scale. Any clinician kind of knows these. These are a little bit more involved. There's one called the Vineland, which is a very comprehensive either parent or teacher interview or both, that looks at a range of functional capacities and what children are capable of doing and what they do over a number of different areas: language, transitioning, feeding, dressing, socialization, things like that. And again, we do these so we have as rich and detailed an understanding of the child as we go through the application review process. Okay. And here, this is more of what I was just saying. We're using these assessments so we just can really get to know your child as well as possible before actually setting eyes on them. Some families can provide an outside medical diagnosis of autism, and that's fine. I don't, it's a little complicated. A medical diagnosis of autism is helpful and meaningful and clinically important, and it can be used as part of the process of determining an IEP classification. Your attorney, if you have questions about that, I would be glad to explain in a separate conversation. IEPs are an educational document. So an IEP classification of autism isn't necessarily the exact same thing as a medical diagnosis. There's a significant amount of overlap, but an IEP it's an educational document. Now, that said, especially for children who are being considered for AIMS or maybe District 75, there may have been developmental pediatricians or neuropsychologists or outside clinicians who have identified and diagnosed autism as a disorder that the child has been identified with, and we would happily receive any information on that. We do like to have some type of assessment done, though, not just a formal diagnosis, something to kind of substantiate and give us a little bit more detail on the degree of it. But any outside information, including from a pediatrician or a developmental specialist, we would happily accept. Okay. in addition to the, and so those assessments, especially for any families out there who have children who are going through the turning five process, if you've submitted an application for your child and they're going through the turning five process, I myself or Miss Mays, we've probably been in touch with your child's turning five team already. And so they're going to be kind of like our frontline people, and they do amazing work. And like I said, we're still waiting on certain safety protocols, but they've already been identified that your child has an AIMS program application. They probably won't be able to do classroom observations, and they probably won't be able to do a formal measure of intelligence. That's fine. We have ways that we can kind of work around that. But what they will do is they'll ask to do a parent interview. They'll ask to speak with your child's preschool teacher. They'll do the adaptive behavior scale with you, the Vineland. They may ask you to sit down for the cars or GARS, all fairly quick. The Vineland is a little more involved, but it's something that can be done over the phone, and those teams would do that. Later on in the process, the clinical team, if a child is being considered for placement in an AIMS program, we may conduct an observation. And what we've been doing is, in order to accommodate families and to maintain safety and health protocols, is we've been doing that virtually. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, right? And actually here. So what we do is, um, while clinical reports and teacher reports and updates and IEPs, it's all incredibly helpful and valuable information. It's no one single piece of information is less important than another. And so we really try to understand the child in totality, in their whole. Information gathered when you can actually see the child, put eyes on the child, it's very meaningful. And so in order to do that, what we've done with families is we've conducted virtual observations. So we would set up times where, for some children, we've observed them in the home setting, we've observed them in the school setting if they're on a blended model, and families have been wonderfully accommodating. And what it does is it allows us to actually see some of the stuff that we're reading on paper, and then be able to get a better sense of how it actually manifests in moment-to-moment interactions. And so normally we would just go out to visit the school, and we would do an extended observation in the child's primary academic setting. We might also observe them with a speech and language provider, because that's a core component of AIMS. And so we're doing our best to provide families with the opportunity to still afford them the opportunity of an observation, while respecting the health and safety protocols that we all want to adhere to and acknowledge. Right? Nothing is more important than health and safety. If after the application review process, and now for the turning five families, this is where it's really kicking in. And over the next couple of months, the clinical team, we're going to be reviewing all the applications. We're going to be reaching out to preschools. We'll be calling you if you haven't heard from us yet or received an email. If at the end of that process, after many back and forth conversations, if a seat is offered, you would be notified of which program you would be placed in. The programs are all the same. It's just there's only 5 locations, right? And we typically go by borough. Families can cross boroughs, that's fine, but because of where each program is in each borough, it kind of falls along those lines, although it doesn't necessarily have to. And what we would do under non-pandemic situations is we would arrange for you to have the opportunity to visit the school, to go by, to talk to staff, to see the school itself, maybe to peek into a classroom. It's a very structured, very intensive data-driven program. So there's a lot going on in the classroom. We don't necessarily, parents not necessarily going into the classroom, but you would be able to see into the classroom, the routines that are being run, how the class is being structured, the different areas. Miss Mays will talk about that. And then after you have that opportunity, you can then let us know if you'll be accepting the placement or not. But we do feel it's really important, and families should have that right to visit a program site before being asked to accept the offer. When starting in the AIMS program, so if everything goes well, the family has made an offer, the family accepts the offer, I will work, and Ms. Mays will work with the school assessment teams, the psychologist and social worker, to develop the AIMS IEP. The IEP is developed, child transitions into the AIMS program, and a couple of really important things happen initially. So first, Ms. Mays will reach out to you or myself, and we'll do what's called an intake. So any information that we feel like we haven't gotten that we need, we will follow up. We're really trying to take as proactive and use as much initiative as possible to support families in ways that the DOE traditionally hasn't. So one of the things Ms. Mays has really spearheaded and taken the lead on is ensuring that all families, certainly within the AIMS program, but really we're trying to broaden this, has been made aware of and has resources to walk through the OPWDD application process. And it's it's really very hard for me to think of any child who's even being considered for AIMS that wouldn't be considered for OPWDD. Miss Mays can talk about that, but that's basically disability insurance through a Medicaid waiver that can afford you and your family, your child, a number of services outside of school. And so we have a number of resources and information that we're providing to families to kind of try to bridge the gap between what happens at school and what happens at home. So that's something we do as a clinical team to try and support families. Once in the program, the child will be administered the ABLLSR. You're going to hear us say ABLS a lot, the ABLS. So for those of you that are going to District 75 or AIMS, you're going to hear ABLS a lot. ABLS is the assessment of basic language and learning skills revised. So it's kind of our assessment tool that we use for collecting data, tracking improvements, tracking targets and objectives, and seeing how well our interventions are working or not, and what needs to be updated and not. AIMS, like I said, it's an incredibly intensive data-driven program. We have an online platform in conjunction with our partnership with Rethink Ed, an organization that works with New York City Department of Education in a number of areas. And so parents have an online platform where they can monitor how well their son or daughter is doing in the program. Information is uploaded frequently, and pedagogical decisions about what to target, what not to target, how well a child is doing can all be supported. So when you go in and you meet with a teacher in the AIMS program, or any program that uses the ABLS, you're going to have a really specific conversation that should be very informative and highly specific to your child and your child's needs, because the data is right there. And that's one of the things we do very, very well in AIMS. And the first couple of weeks to month or so, maybe even more, maybe 2 or 3 months, is a process called pairing. AIMS is really built on the idea that students need to be motivated to learn. And that's not something that's specific to AIMS. That's human beings in general, right? That's everyone, right? But for children who have been identified with more severe manifestations of autism, establishing what motivates children, what you may have heard of as reinforcers, is very, very important. So that first quarter even, there's a lot of work and a lot of emphasis on making sure the classroom is an enjoyable, satisfying, motivating, reinforcing environment, right? We want children to come in, to be able to come to school, even if they don't have the language to express it, to begin to be able to pair their teacher, their speech provider, the classroom para, the OT, the principal. These are going to be very desirable people and environments to be around, which is then going to allow our staff to do their thing. So there's a lot of reinforcement. This is a process called pairing that takes place during the initial most stages of the AIMS educational process. But it's super important. It sounds fun, it sounds great, but it's actually a very important and very significant clinical procedure. And because if you don't have pairing and you don't have motivation, you're not going to be able to run a VB program. You just won't be able to do it. Right. So it's that first step, but it's the foundation upon which all of the stuff that follows is built. Okay. So this is going to, that the pairing, the ABLS, the intake, these are things that happen during the first couple of weeks, month or two, in enrollment. When we talk about children with autism in general, above and beyond just the AIMS program, although that is Ms. Mays and myself, that's our primary assignment within the DOE. There are a number of other options available to families, all the way from community school settings, to the District 75 program, right? So in community school settings, having come from a community school background, like Mr. Cortez was saying, I've worked with autism specific populations for about the last 7 years or so. But I have worked in community school settings, and I have worked in local elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, where there have been children with autism, and there hasn't necessarily been an autism specific program in the school, but for some children who are able to function on grade level academically, but need some other types of supports, that can be considered an appropriate placement. These are all things you're going to talk with your school assessment team, especially for the Turning Five families. What is an appropriate placement for my child within the confines of what you see there, LRE, least restrictive environment, and free and appropriate public education? Where can my child's needs be adequately supported, and they are still exposed to a challenging and meaningful curriculum that allows them to grow in an optimal way? In community schools, like I had mentioned, I had previously been affiliated with them, no longer, but there are wonderful programs like the ASD Nest and ASD Horizon programs that are ASD specific programs. They have a very extensive footprint around New York City, and quite frankly, they're world renowned for the work they do. It's truly amazing what they accomplish in those programs. But it's for a very specific type of child. On the autism spectrum, that there's this very specific profile that those programs are intended to support. Beyond that, once you move past the community school setting, and there are self-contained classes, Horizon is actually a self-contained model. It's an 8-to-1-to-1 model, but it's in a community school setting. You then move into more restrictive settings with District 75. And in District 75, you have a number of programs, really most any program in District 75, not all, but most can be calibrated towards supporting a child with aims, including inclusion. There's an Office of Inclusive Education, but you have classes of 12, 12-to-1-to-1, 8-to-1-to-1, 6-to-1-to-1, and these are all classes and programs designed to support children who have various educational disabilities as determined by their IEP. But with respect to autism, all of those are fully capable of supporting children with aims. What you want to do is make sure that the child is their current functional levels and their needs match up with the programs that are recommended, right? A child who has maybe I want to be careful how I say this, but just a child whose language and communication skills maybe are delayed, but they are able to use language and phrases to communicate their needs. Maybe they have issues, there could be impediments in language. Maybe there are some issues with self-regulation or stereotypies or repetitive behaviors or real intense difficulties with transitions, right? But they have some skills. The parent and the school assessment team might feel, oh, a class of 6 is too restrictive for this child. They can do better in a more challenging and maybe in an environment that has more traditional academics or something like that involved. And so we do have those types of programs, and this is where your interactions and your communication with the psychologist and social worker as part of the IEP process becomes really important. And there are, outside of AIMS, there are programs around New York City, District 75 programs that do use an ABA-VB approach. One of the things that AIMS also benefits from, and I'll hand this off to Ms. Mays in a moment, is in addition to having the speech provider in the room, we have BCBAs connected with each school. So in each school, we have a BCBA, that's a board certified behavior analyst, who supports staff, the students, the school, to maintain the fidelity of the AIMS program. Some schools have coaches in their building, District 75, that are BCBAs. I'm not familiar with all the programs, but I do know that there are other programs aside from AIMS that do use an ABA-VB methodology, and that's something that is certainly available to families, okay, as part of the IEP recommendation process. Okay. So I'll hand it over to Ms. Mays. Julian, you have to unmute yourself, and then just let me know when you want me to.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Dr. Borg.
Well,
Okay, as Dr. Borg mentioned, AIMS is an ABA-VB program. Now, what's ABA-VB? ABA stands for Applied Behavior Analysis. Providers apply techniques based in the science of behavior to increase desired behaviors and decrease behaviors that interfere with the student's learning. Providers focus on behaviors that they can see, And one of the most important parts of ABA is that they take data based on the child's responses. So there's ongoing data collection happening all day to inform the decisions about how they teach your child or what interventions they use with your child. So providers focus on meaningful and functional skills. What can improve my child's life right now? How can they better communicate? For example, skills can be taught in any setting or environment. Now, this is what ABA is not. It's not sitting at a table all day. It's not teaching one-on-one. It's not rote memorization. And it's not only about correcting challenging behaviors. And we'll talk a little bit more about how the classroom environment is set up uh, for the child and how they use ABA there. Verbal behavior. Verbal behavior is based on the principles of ABA, but with a specific focus on teaching language and communication. There's a speech language provider in every classroom, and their interventions focus on helping the student establish functional skills in the area of communication, language, behavior, and socialization. This may mean helping them initiate communication or manding, which is making requests, um, being able to focus attention on a task or on a person, and following simple directions. The targets and goals are developed after a careful assessment and looking at the data and for each individual student. Go on. Okay, um, we have a BCBA coaching the teachers and supporting the classroom in each one of our sites. It actually stands for Board Certified Behavior Analyst. They're an expert in applied behavior analysis, and they know how to design appropriate interventions based on uh, assessment results for each individual child. Like I said, there's one for each school in each borough. And of course, the Office of Autism will also help support. We have three fantastic BCBAs, two of which are deployed to schools right now, but we will do anything that we can or reach out to them to continue to support our BCBAs in each school and our students. Okay, now individual classrooms are staffed this way. Each Ames classroom includes a special education teacher, a speech teacher, a speech language professional, a classroom paraprofessional, and whatever else the child's mandate requires. We have occupational therapists, we have physical therapists, we have supports for English language learners. They receive all the services in an Ames classroom that they would elsewhere based on their IEP. And as well, like we said, the BCBA provides in-class coaching support and reviews the students' programs, helps with data collection, and uh, provides ongoing coaching and training for the staff members. Okay, each student receives daily one-on-one sessions to target their goals. So there will be someone working with the child, definitely every day one-on-one. The speech teacher provides 5 one-to-one sessions per week and 1 group session of speech and language education for each child. The special ed teacher does daily one-on-one sessions and group sessions throughout the week. We will have a para in each classroom that supports on-group instruction and will support each student on an individual basis whenever it's needed. And it's a collaboration. The speech teacher and the special education teacher and all the related service providers communicate with each other to support and see what's best for each individual child. As mentioned, the students may work on communication skills or behavior goals, self-help, imitation, and play and social skills. And data is constantly taken throughout the day to support your child's progress and to see what the best interventions are for them. Okay. During the beginning of each school year, the classroom works in collaboration on the areas of assessment, pairing. I think Dr. Borg spoke a little bit about what pairing was. It was establishing the relationship between the child and the teacher. Um, Support relationship development with staff, helping students become familiar with their learning environments. The students will take part in a rotation schedule, which focuses on supporting one-on-one and small group interactions each day. The classrooms are highly structured, and the students rotate to different sessions every 20 to 30 minutes. The team teaches students to follow a visual schedule. What that is there'll be a schedule on the wall and for the classroom and a schedule for each child with perhaps images so the child knows when a transition is coming, they know what to expect. I had one-on-one time with um, Miss Mays, and now we're moving to gym or to art or to lunch or uh, to another part of the day. So the student understands what the transitions are and knows what to expect throughout the day. Okay. Like I mentioned before, ABA is not sitting at a table doing rote tasks during the day. All of our Ames classrooms have independent workstations and a play area and a small group area and a sensory motor corner where particularly if sometimes the child needs to maybe calm down or needs a break time from a task, these are the things that are available to the child. So they're not just sitting at a table doing one-on-one tasks. They also receive additional instruction by related service providers outside the classroom setting. Okay. The Ames clinical team, psychologist, Dr. Borg, and social worker, myself, Julie Mays, we're the primary clinical providers and make up the Ames clinical team. We work with families and schools, providing a lot of different supports, parent counseling and training, uh, family-centered workshops. We work with Rethink and some other organizations to support SEL, that's social emotional learning needs. Support with OPWDD application, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. And services, we do monthly check-ins with the family, weekly check-ins with the school, and we reach out to community-based organizations and preschools like Synergia, for example. And we're always available at any time for our families when they need extra support. Okay, we collaborate with participating schools and develop and shape type of resources and supports and workshops that are offered. Each school is encouraged to develop the options that best reflect the school community and the needs of the families. So we really try to keep connected with our families to find out, what do you need? Do you need more help with services? Do you want us to reach out to you one-on-one? Do you just need to vent or for us to lend an ear? We do support and family counseling. We really try to stay very close to our parents and find out from them what exactly or how exactly can we best meet your needs. Okay, Ames program in collaboration with Rethink. We offer workshops to Ames families that address specific issues related to mental health and well-being. These workshops utilize what they call an SEL curriculum and are intended to provide our families with support and information in the areas of self-care and stress management and other topics. We just had a great workshop on mindfulness and like actually a couple of days ago. And what we really understand is parents work so hard. Particularly because of the pandemic, everyone's at home. You are now not just a mom or dad, but you're now a speech teacher and a classroom teacher and a PT and all of these other things that you weren't trained for. And we know how stressful it can be. Maybe you're still working and you have other children that you have to attend, and there's a lot going on, and very often um, self-care for parents can fall by the wayside. And we just want to remind you that you need to take care of yourself as well so you can be there for your child. Okay. OPWDD, that's the Office for People with Developmental Disabilities. Um, we assist with OPWDD services. Uh, Dr. Borg and I will provide you with information, supports, and resources that can help you navigate the Medicaid waiver process, which can seem very daunting for a lot of families. We'll let you know or talk to you about the types of services that are available, the different ways that you can utilize their resources, and support homeschool collaboration to make sure that the services are consistent. OPWDD can provide a lot. It can help you with respite care, with recreation services for older students, work training, cohab, dayhab, and supported housing, help with medical needs, things of that nature. So we definitely, as I think Dr. Boyd had mentioned, suggest that all of our families take advantage of all of these resources that OPWDD can provide. Okay, like I mentioned, we maintain consistent contact with all of our Ames families to provide ongoing individualized supports and resources. We're contacted by phone or email on a monthly basis. When required, you can be supported on a semi-monthly or more intensive basis, depending on your needs, which we tailor to meet each specific family. Okay, the Ames clinical team, myself and Dr. Bork, schedule weekly check-ins with the BCBA and sometimes the administration of each program school. Our focus is on identifying families who need extra support and developing and coordinating timely responses. The goal is to provide proactive support that can preempt problematic situations and to offer immediate support that can address and minimize the duration and intensity of a situation or problem, basically to bridge the gap between home and school. Regularly scheduled email check-ins with teachers and related services providers also originate from our team. Okay, we arrange information sessions such as this one for CBOs, and that's community-based organization, CBO, and preschools, and provide information about what the Ames program is for families and providers, and particularly during the turning 5, the T5 process, we try to provide support for families and children who are transitioning into kindergarten.
Okay. All right. So that concludes our PowerPoint, which we're getting very familiar with in these year of Zoom. So I hope it was informative. Thank you, Julian. Really appreciate that. So JC, that's kind of the bulk of our presentation, but I see that there's probably a whole host of questions.
We do have some questions. Thank you so much for such an informative and very informational.
Yeah, I hope it wasn't too much. It gets a
both.
little heavy, but thank you for hosting us. We appreciate it.
No, thank you. Yes, so we do have some questions and we want to get to all of them. Thank you so much for making the time for all of them. One of the questions that we receive via Facebook is, what does the program look like now during COVID? And are you having classes in person?
So the program, we're trying to maintain as much fidelity to the original vision. We do have, Julian, I want to say all of our schools are up and running, but in various models. So some of the schools are using a blended model, 1 week in, 1 week out. I think one of our schools may actually be up and running full time because they can have all the children in, because a certain number of kids, students, excuse me, have opted for remote learning. So those that are left can come in 5 days a week, every day, every week. Of course, 2 weeks ago, there was the school, another part of the school got shut down. It's just, I don't mean to laugh, but it's COVID and it's horrific and it's terrible,
So
and everyone's just trying to manage. But we are up and running. We do virtual sessions, and this is where families have really, like Julene was saying, parents are being asked to be so much more than a parent now, to do a speech session daily, and then an additional group of 2, or a PT and an OT session. But we're up and running. We're collecting data. We're trying to maintain fidelity to the program under these just horrific circumstances. Julene?
And I was just going to say, sometimes it's dependent on the school. If an individual school is closed because of the zone that it's in, or because there was a case in the school, for example, the AIMS program will have to go along with the schedule of what's happening with the school.
But we are up and running.
Yes,
We
yep.
are up and running, and the teachers and the staff are doing their best, and really just, it's sad, but it's also incredibly heartwarming and encouraging to see what our parents are doing, what the parents do in support of their children. It's absolutely amazing what these families are doing under such challenging circumstances.
Absolutely, absolutely. One of the questions also is, can you help us understand the differences between AIMS and the ACEs program?
Sure. And so the ACEs program, what I would encourage is anyone who is interested in learning more about ACEs, you can reach out to them. I believe it's there's if you type ACEs NYC DOE in Google, I forget what their inbox is, but ACEs is a unique program. Phyllis Rochester was the director, but she just retired, I think. So what they are, it's a program for students who've been identified with an IEP classification of intellectual disability. Okay, so it's not an autism specific program. It's for children who have an intellectual developmental disorder. It's a community-based program. So the students with the IEP classification of intellectual disability attend an educational program within a community school, not a District 75 setting. And I'm not super familiar with the curriculum. When I used to work with Nest and Horizon, we had sort of a working partnership, but I was never, I wouldn't consider myself fully versed on it. But they do have a contact point. I don't know off the top of my head what their email is, but if you reach out to them, they'll get back to you immediately. So they're part of the Department of Education specialized programs, bilingual education, ASD specialized, and ACEs. And there's a new 4th one, I can't remember what it is, that operates under the specialized education programs. But that's a program, a community-based program for children with an intellectual disability.
We can send that information in the follow-up email to those who have attended today. So thank you for that.
Sure.
For parents that want to visit, when they have the opportunity to visit, are they visiting virtually or are they visiting in person?
Oh yeah, a great question. So right now it would be virtually. So there are some really tight requirements, and health and safety is number one. So about maximum number of people, who's coming into the building, why are they in the building? So new admits right now, there would be some very much more stringent kind of parameters around the visit. So our schools have arranged for virtual visits, to send pictures, to have opportunities to meet with the teachers virtually, things like that. Because it's just what schools are being asked to deal with, literally the number of people you could have in a certain area. And you can't go over that. So even introducing one person from the outside, the school is then in violation. And so they have these really stringent requirements that they have to deal with. So we don't really have in-person visitation, at least in the traditional sense at this point. Gotcha. Hopefully that will change soon.
Okay, and since you mentioned this, is this program specifically for children and only for children with autism?
It is a program that the child has to be eligible for an IEP classification of autism. So the ABA-VB methodology that we use is really, it really has been, it's most salient, and most of the empirically driven data and research is with children with autism. So that's where, that's what we work with.
Okay. Is this program only for younger children?
Yes. So it's a K-2 program. So, and it's a program for what we refer to in education as early learners. And so these are bridge classes, children in kindergarten, first and second grade. And for those 3 grades, we can kind of bridge it, because it's not so much the difference between, say, a 5 and a 7-year-old that's important. That could be important for other children. That those 2 years can be a tremendous difference. But because all of our children are developmentally at the same level, and they're working on the same skill sets in general, which is just the acquisition of functional communication, that's why we can do that kind of bridge class. But it's only for children in K1 and 2 at this point. Yeah.
At this point, okay. Do you need to meet my child in person?
No. We will ask to see if we are moving forward, and the application review process, we do our best to work with the families to accommodate them, to see what we can do regarding an observation. But at this point, what we're doing is our virtual observations. So I must be Zoom's, and Julian and I, Zoom's frequent user of the month, because we have so many Zoom meetings, and we did observations recently for a child in their speech session in their classroom, at home with mom and the siblings and grandma, right? So, but all of this is done through virtual platforms. We don't want to put anyone's health at risk. We don't want to inadvertently do anything that poses any safety concerns to anyone. So everything is being done with health and safety first.
Okay. My son is 7 years old and he's been diagnosed with severe autism, and he's already in a 6-to-1-to-1 class. How would I go about putting him in this program? I love ABA therapy, and it had a huge impact in my son's development and progress when he was 1 year old.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think this parent's feeling, a lot of parents feel what this parent you just voiced for them. So, um, there's kind of 2 things that I'm thinking of, and Julene, feel free to jump in. One is, it is an application process, and unfortunately, because of all the circumstances, the program is fully enrolled at this point. We do anticipate, there's the hope and the expectation that as children articulate out, some new seats will become available. I don't have any information on whether or not the program will expand for this coming year. I hope it does, but I just want to be clear that I do not have any information on that. The Department of Education is dealing with lots of stuff right now. So, but I would encourage any family who's interested to submit an application. Like I said in the presentation, though, Ames isn't necessarily the only game in town, right? There are other 6-to-1-to-1s that do great work. I've been in a couple of schools recently, not in schools, but talking with and observations that run the similar type program that we run, and the children in those programs are receiving the highest quality of education. It's quite extraordinary. So there are District 75 organizations throughout all the 5 boroughs that do use a similar model, the ABA-VB model, with great success.
Okay. Uh, is there a different team for each location, or is it the same team for all 5? I believe they mean clinical team.
Oh, it's the same team for all 5. We're the
Okay.
we're the clinical team.
All right. How can I apply?
So the application is online. If not, I see someone put, oh, JC, you put that, great. So JC put the email address into the chat. So if this parent can just open up the chat, and it's 3 items up from the bottom. And if you email, all you have to do is send an email, I'm interested in the program, I want to apply. Just something super basic like that. We'll get you the application. Let us know the language you need. We'll send out an info booklet on that. And then you just complete that and you return it to that email address that JC was kind enough to post for everyone.
Yes,
it doesn't need to be an involved email. Just, I want to apply, and boom, we'll get on it.
That's perfect. No, no, no. And we will definitely include that follow-up, the email address in the follow-up email to this
Mhm.
presentation. How many students are altogether in the program?
Well, it has 90 students, right? And so right now we are at maximum capacity. There's a couple of situations we're working on, but we don't have any available seats at this moment. We now I would, like I said though, I would encourage families to apply because for September it's possible that I I'm hoping that there'll be open seats in one of two ways, and so even if not, we have 90 seats in the city right now. The program is fully enrolled, but I would strongly encourage anyone who's interested in the program to apply because seats can open up at any time. Other things can happen, decisions made at the highest levels. Say if the program expands or new sites are added or things like that, suddenly you have a whole bunch of seats. So it's better to get an application in than not. Again, I don't have any information on that, but we're doing well with
Sure.
what we have. So yeah,
My son is 5 years old with autism, and he's in a District 75 school. Can I still apply for this program for my son that is nonverbal?
absolutely, absolutely.
And also for kids with genetic syndromes with multiple aspects to their condition, intellectual disabilities, autism, speech delays, fine and gross motor delays, where is the extent of their autism that
Yeah.
may not be clear? Would this program be appropriate?
That's a wonderful question, and that's one of the this is where the individualized education plan becomes so important because it's not a cookie cutter model, and children are just like adults. They're complex, they're diverse, they're a unique constellation of all sorts of different wonderful things and areas where they may need support, areas where they do well. So children who have what some people call comorbid or where there are multiple developmental needs going on, we've had children kind of come to our attention that have had that profile, and we'll do everything we can to kind of try to tease out what is it that the child, to what degree do they need support here, what do they need support here with, what do they need support here with, and is Ames capable of supporting those programs? So we had an informal conversation with a parent not too long ago where the child had multiple needs. Autism was one of a number of class disabilities that the child had been identified with, but in talking with the parent, she recognized, oh, my child is also going to need this, and this, and this other program, this other setting would be a much more appropriate placement because of these other needs that my child also presents with. So while autism is one area in which the child was required support, there were several other really important areas, health related conditions, developmental disorders, and things of the like, that the parents said, oh no, I see how Amos is structured, I see what you're doing in there, and yeah, that my child may need support in those areas, but these other areas probably wouldn't be as addressed as well as they should.
Gotcha. Okay. Um, Everyone, just a time warning. We have about 15 minutes left, so we're going to try and push through all of these questions as quickly as possible and get to every one of them. If you do not, however, please feel free to know that you can contact the Ames team at the email address, which will be provided in the follow-up email in case we don't get to it. But let's continue. Thank you so much for this great presentation. Can you please describe more about your data collection procedures? Also, how do you collect data for all students when it's not a one-to-one model? And lastly, how often is the BCBA in one classroom or meeting consultation with those teachers? Thank you.
Okay. Do you want to take that, or you want? Because I
Um,
can.
there was
Well,
a lot of components to
yeah,
that
That was a
multiple
lot.
levels to that.
there is one-on-one instruction.
Yeah,
I
right.
think what we were saying is it's not exclusively one-on-one instruction, but we have 6 children in each classroom with an SLP and the special education teacher and a paraprofessional and the related service providers. So there's plenty of time, and to use the SLP, for example, that's a mandated 5 sessions a week, one-on-one with each child. So there's plenty of time, and they all collect data as they go throughout the day.
Yeah,
Great.
and the BCBA is integral in supporting teachers in that respect. So the teachers in running their programs and interventions with the children through the ABLES are collecting throughout the day data on the target goals, what the child has mastered, what they haven't mastered. And the process of ABA is really kind of built around data collection and tracking growth and improvement. So it's really a daily activity that we then collect the data, and each school has their own kind of a mild twist on it, but all of that information then gets collected and uploaded, usually on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, so that families also have access to kind of a general understanding of where the child, they don't see the specific data, but this is Bobby's doing better here, Linda has kind of plateaued here, so we're going to adjust this, or Mary needs that, Joseph needs this, that kind of thing. But the data collection is extraordinarily intensive and accounts for a large part of the work, but it's not data collection for the sake of data collection. It really drives every decision and every educational interventions the teachers make. It's supported by the data.
And I wanted to mention that we have a dedicated BCBA for each school. There are 3 AIMS classrooms in each school, which provides a lot of time for the BCBA to get to know the students, to get to know the nature of the classroom. They spend a lot of time. They meet very frequently with the staff. Just to add that in, they're very, very involved with the AIMS classes.
Okay. Do the children in the program have any opportunities to socialize with neurotypical kids in the school building, or are they completely isolated? And if they do have interaction opportunities, even if by passing them the hallways, are they supervised at all times? And are the neurotypical kids in the building taught about inclusivity and acceptance?
So because we're housed in District 75 schools, the opportunity to interact with neurotypically developing children isn't something that's kind of incorporated into the program on a consistent and meaningful basis. I'm just trying to think of our different schools. So the way we have it structured right now is each of the organizations that houses an AIMS program, some of them do share, they do co-share buildings with community school programs, but just the physical structure of the building itself doesn't lend itself well to interaction. So the District 75 may have a wing here and then the other wing on the other side. So there isn't a lot of contact, between the schools, not as a means of intentionally, separating children based on school or need or any other variable. It's just the basic structure of the building, the architecture of the building doesn't allow for it. I would the children in the AIMS program, like I said though earlier, because of the where I think the opportunity to interact with children is super important for all aspects of development, not the least being language acquisition. But because our children have such significant delays in overall language and communication, and it can impair things like joint attention, sustained attention, their ability to socially interact. It's not something that we incorporate into the program at this point, because those types of interactions our children are still working on gaining the skills to be able to do, right? So we're building the most basic skills, just how to functionally communicate.
Gotcha. Is there a transition plan after 2nd grade?
There is. I wish I could give more information, but it's something that we work with on each of the schools. If Mr. Corallo were here, I know that he's spent a tremendous amount of time and sweat and tears on this. And what I think we're doing is trying to work with each school, each program school, to because you have to take into account a number of variables. Again, the building, the classrooms, all of these really factors you don't really realize until you're in the middle of it. It's like, wow, this. So yes, there are absolute transition programs. As a new program, it's something, admittedly, we're identifying, we're working on it, we're going through our first couple of years. So that's probably something that will evolve over the course of time. I think what families can be assured of is that at every step of the way, we want to make sure the child's best interests are served. So if a child has moved through the AIMS program, to be able to make sure that they articulate into another program that still provides them with the appropriate level of support so they can continue to grow and develop. And hopefully, every child is their own unique person. But to see a child who comes into AIMS in a 6-to-1-to-1, it would be great. We have had at one of our schools 2 kids go into an 8. So they went through AIMS, they really benefited, they grabbed on, they were only in the program for a year, and they moved up to an 8-to-1-to-1 programs. And and that's great. And we hope that for all our children.
All right. Let's see. What can parents do if the child needs ABA after elementary school, not in District 75?
So you want to talk maybe a little bit about, is there?
You mean outside of school, or if they're in secondary school, if they're in junior high school? I can't speak to exactly what will happen depending on the child's placement for 6th grade or for high school. I will say that there's OPWDD self-direction.
Yeah.
That which is a separate other subject that I would love to be able to speak with our parents about, or give them some more information if they contact myself or Dr. Board. That can be spent, it's getting a budget for your child that you can dispense the money as you see fit. You can hire an ABA therapist or SLP or any other sort of services that you want your child to have. However, you're also responsible for a lot for all of the budgeting, for the hiring and firing and scheduling and taxes and being responsible. And it's very overwhelming for a lot of parents.
Because actually we have a self-direction liaison here in the as a participant. Yeah.
Oh,
That's
okay.
Great. And yeah,
So-
no, for sure. If you needed more information on that, definitely contact the program, and they can be sure to assist you. I know if you need some assistance with Synergia through education advocate specialist, rather, you can always contact our intake line, and we can try and assist you there. We have time for just a couple more questions. What is the reason that children with other diagnoses are not included in such programs? What about integration?
Well, like I said earlier, so my understanding is that this is a program, because of the methodology we use, that it was developed and the specific type of intervention we use was researched and developed around children with autism. It's a great question. Right now, because it operates out of the Office of Autism and all of the supporting staff are trained in working with children with autism, that's the population we serve. But as a broader intervention model, yeah, it's a valid question.
I'm an occupational therapist with a pre-K student. We are having turning 5. Is there a contact information? Actually, we just replied to that. So just a follow-up to that last question was from the same parent. Structures of the school building cannot be reason for not giving any opportunities to socialize. All children are going to live in the world outside of school. Inclusion, just the word, is not action. All right, and I put my AIMS application back in November, and I've already spoken to Dr. Borg in the fall, but I have yet to hear from the committee. Do you know what next steps I should take?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So any parent who's going through the Turning 5 process, if you submitted an AIMS program application, you might have heard from myself or Ms. Mays, your Turning 5 teams, they are so it's a little bit of a tricky year. So they're going to be contacting families very, very soon. So the teams in the schools will reach out to you. You should get a letter in the mail. I'm not sure when. What they're trying to figure out is what's safe, and what's appropriate, what are the health and safety protocols that we need to put in place to get the T5 process rolling. And typically in the past, families would have received a letter. I can't remember if it's the green letter or the blue letter. There's different letters going out just saying, hey, this is your turning 5 team. The psychologist and social worker in your local community school, PS1, they'll be contacting you, blah, blah, blah. That hasn't happened yet because of the restrictions around COVID, but it should be happening very, very soon. The supervisors of psychologists in the city are waiting on that information. Once it's transmitted out and it goes to the teams, then the teams will find out who's on their cases and they'll reach out to families.
All right. Well, thank you so much, team, for answering all of those questions. It seems like we missed a few more, but we don't have that much time left to answer them. Please, if you have those questions and you'd like to, you can always reach out directly to the team, which will be provided in the follow-up email to this presentation. We ask that you keep us in mind for future programming, and we will be here next week with presentations on Turning 5, understanding the kindergarten IEP, and the following day, how to navigate special education during COVID. That will be the first one will be presented by our partners at Advocates for Children, and the second program will be by our partners at Cuddy Law, who were here to do the guardianship presentation last month. And yes, we ask that you kindly fill out the survey. We're going to do a quick poll for those of you that are still with us. Thank you so much for staying with us. We really appreciate it. We'd love to know how we can help you better. But please fill out this little poll and you will receive an email from us with the links to our presentation survey. If you need any other assistance, we also want to remind you that at Synergia, we offer informative workshops on education advocacy assistance, individualized specialized education guidance with our bilingual English-Spanish education specialist who can assist you. We also have our Autism Initiative program where you have access to information on access and referrals and services for your loved one. And Synergia also offers some OPWDD services. We invite you to connect with us at our intake department. You can call them Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. at 212-643-2840, or you can email them directly at intake@synergia, New York. Thank you so much, everybody. We really appreciate it. And yes, let me see, maybe there's another question we can answer really quick in the 1 minute that we have before we get cut off. But if not, thank you so much, everybody. We really appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Thanks, JC. Thank you, everyone.